Thanks, Margie. So I'm Edmund Chuck. So I work at Kurrawong AI as a software engineer. I've been developing data systems for a few years now on top of knowledge graphs. And today I'm just going to do a brief introduction about knowledge graphs and linked data and all of that stuff to kind of set the scene, and then talk about Prez and how that fits in to these kinds of architectures, and then talk a bit about editorial workflows and how other people are managing vocabs and other things within knowledge graphs. So just to do a little brief introduction, knowledge graphs, they're basically made up of nodes and edges, slightly different to relational database systems. They're basically, the data is basically represented using a conceptual data model. The shape of that model is very similar to the actual implementation of the data. So usually it's very easy to query and very easy to navigate those kinds of data structures, whereas with your relational database systems, you have your conceptual, logical, and physical data models there, and the actual tables they may be quite different to what your conceptual models look like, because they're usually optimized for different use cases and different queries that you actually need to use for your day-to-day workflows. So just some principles around knowledge graphs. It's very important to follow the linked data principles. So the number one rule here is to make sure you use IRIs to identify things. So IRIs are these funky looking things that look like URLs. When you put them into a web browser, they usually resolve. If you're a human, usually it returns some kind of HTML for you to look at. But if you're a machine and the machine's requested for some machine readable format, then the server will try its best to return that format back to you. It's important for your resources that are identified with IRIs to then be linked by other things that are identified by IRIs. And then from there, you slowly build up a network of graphs and edges to form your knowledge graph. So the simplest way to get into all of this is to go for the lowest hanging fruit, which are vocabularies in different data systems. Usually in your relational database system, you have these isolated lookup tables with key value pairs in them, and they're usually a good starting point for converting stuff into vocabs and start loading that into your knowledge graph. So these vocabs are usually either in a flat or hierarchical structure, and they're usually used to standardize terminology within your domain or your system or your organization. They're usually based on the SCOS data model. So it's an international standard made by the W3C to describe vocabularies in a standardized way. And then from there, your vocabs are then usually used to categorize other things. So in your relational systems, you can then start replacing those primary keys that are pointing to those lookup tables to then point to these IRIs in your knowledge graph. Here's a fun little example. So this is SNOMED CT. It's an international collection of medical terms. There's an instance of it online. You can access it on the Shrimp Onto server. It's hosted by CSIRO. It's a copy of the Australian version of SNOMED CT, I believe. And from here, you can imagine, doctors and medical staff using systems that use SNOMED CT, and they can go in and type different medical terms. So for example, heart attack, and get results back. So you can imagine, doctors writing medical notes, and they can start tagging these notes with certain things. But by typing heart attack, the first hit that comes back is myocardial infarction. So that's the actual medical term that they use. So once the doctors select that, they can see actually heart attack is one of the synonyms for that thing. So this is just an example of how these common terminologies with synonyms and that start becoming standardized within a more complicated data system. Within your knowledge graph, you have vocabs, so they're the more simpler things. They're not always simple, but it's a good place to start. But then you start going into other things in your knowledge graph that you want to represent, such as other resources. They're usually other objects, other entities, such as organizations, people, automatic weather stations, soil samples, any kind of thing that you want to represent. And usually you create a conceptual data model to represent these things, and then convert the data into that format and load them in. These are usually highly structured and have very rich relationships to other things. So here's just a simple diagram, an example of that. We're looking at geographical objects with geographical names. Those yellow things are what you would see as vocab terms in your vocabulary. So those blue things are linked to that yellow thing, saying that they are some kind of island. And then those blue things have these other things linking to it. Those are the names for those blue things. So that node on the right, 47533, it has 3 names for it: Fraser Island and 2 other indigenous versions of Gari. And then just by looking at this, we can see that they have these relationships to these other blue things, and it's saying that it's derived from those things. So we can see that this thing supersedes those other things. So from there, we can see knowledge graphs are powerful. They can represent highly complex data structures, and also can become quite complicated. So this is where Prez, something like Prez comes in, where it provides that unified layer with both human and machine readable APIs. So if you're a human and you come and browse Prez, it's just like a normal web application. You can navigate around. Organizations adopting Prez, you guys already know this. You can customize it with your organizational branding and colors. But what I want to mention here is the newer versions of Prez. We also do support custom widgets, and also the ability to override other widgets that are part of Prez into whatever the requirements are for those organizations. On the machine readability side, we have various different JSON APIs, so simple, key value listing things, or more complicated structures that are closer to RDF. And we're also we also support the next generation set of OGC JSON APIs as well. So you have your OGC records APIs for vocabs and other resources. And then if you have spatial features and things, you can use the OGC features APIs for those. And this is really cool because now there are more Prez capable of more and more things, and more tooling that understand these standards. Basically, they just work out of the box for Prez. So a simple example here is if you're a GIS user and you use QGIS or QGIS, it is entirely possible for you to open that up and point to an existing Prez instance with to its OGC features endpoint, and then it will be able to load in all of the data needed for your day-to-day workflow in QGIS. I'm going to go over some of the Prez instances that other organizations are using. So these are organizations that we've worked directly in the past and also indirectly, and we'll just have a look at how they're using Prez, some of the features they're using, and some of the customizations that they've made to Prez. So I'm going to stop presentation mode. I'm just going to click on. Can I just confirm, sorry, Margie, that you can see that I've changed tabs in my browser?
Yep, we're looking at the British Geological Survey.
Perfect. All right. So this is a project that we did with the British Geological Survey last year. In this system, we have a demonstrator for a spatial data catalog within Prez, as well as a set of vocabularies. So with GA, currently you're using VocPrez version 2, which only deals with vocabs. The current Prez version 3 deals with not just vocabs, but also spatial stuff in the spatial data catalog, as well as other things that you want to catalog as well. So here we have these two subsystems that we're going to just briefly have a look at, and later I'll show you the data catalog as well. So going through, this is the version 3 of vocprez, and it works just the same as what you're used to in your GA instance of vocprez. This is a simple vocab with a few dozen terms, and through this project, we actually had to redevelop a few things in Prez, and that's because the British Geological Survey, BGS, they actually have vocabs that have, concepts with 14,000, vocabs with 14,000 concepts. So something like this BGS lexicon. And this thing is just not possible to be loaded in one go. So what we've done is now these large vocabs are able to be loaded progressively. So we load it chunk by chunk as users navigate through these large vocabs, and you can expand these and view. So basically every time you navigate it, it's loading more and more, and not just in one go. Another thing that I want to highlight is if I go into any of these concepts, you can have arbitrary properties on these vocabs. So we have all these other things listed here, and they've got these other terms that they need. So these ones, we don't have labels in them, but we can load labels so that these present nicer in Prez. You can see we've done that for these other properties here. So this is just an example of another kind of customization element that you can do in Prez, where you can load in custom labels. If you don't like, the normal definition label here, you can replace that with something like description or something else. Another thing I want to point out is this other vocab called the BGS geochronology. When we navigate through this vocab, you can see there are now colors next to these concepts. So this is another customization thing that they've requested, and it's made available to all Prez instances now. These concepts can have these color properties, and when Prez sees them, they will display them in a nice way. And basically they wanted this because this is how they recognize these time periods. A lot of the times I can't pronounce these, so it makes sense that they refer to them as, like, I don't know, yellow or blue or whatever. The other thing I want to show you now is the spatial side of Prez. So there's this spatial data catalog where you can load in data with features and geometries attached to them. Once they're loaded in, Prez can perform queries, spatial queries, and then from here you can navigate and view these catalog things. So if I go through this, there are 4 feature collections. I can view one of them. And if I click on one of these features, because there's a geometry, it's loaded up onto a Google map here. And just as another example, these properties here, they're actually linking to the existing vocabs that are in the vocab section of Prez. So all of these things, the values are these vocab concepts, and if you click on them, it navigates to that vocab. There are all these other properties that you can add to different resources as well. And they're not just simple properties that are either a vocab thing or a literal value like a string. We can also add in complex objects that have its own key value pairs and things in there as well. So this additional property is a way, this is in no way like specific to Prez, but it's a data model that from schema.org that we can use to embed any kind of value on these resources. All right, so that's the BGS Prez. So they've got vocabs, they've got some spatial data in there. We're going to quickly have a look at the ANU catalog, and in this one, I just want to quickly point out the vocabs listing page. So vocabs are also resources, so you can tag these vocabs with other vocab terms as well. So these vocabs, they have these statuses, these status values. So you can see these are stable and these are experimental. And we also have other vocabs here that are in use as well for derivation mode. So if you need any other custom stuff added in here, it's totally doable. We're going to move on to the IDN Prez instance. They have vocabs, spatial data catalog, which we've seen already, and we're just going to quickly look at the data catalog. So there's also a map, but this is really just to search for things, for records that have like a spatial extent to them. But as we navigate through them, you can see with each record, you can have very rich metadata, all standardized and internationally recognized. But the one thing I want to point out here is this fair and care score widget. So this is something that the custom widgets that I was talking about, where these new prezes, if you do have these, this rich data now that's in knowledge graphs that you can derive new information from, you can then go ahead and do that and create these custom widgets and display them to your users. So I thought this was pretty cool. Next Prez instance is from the Department of Resources in Queensland. So they're doing the same kind of thing. The thing that I want to point out here is with these different pages, they've customized it to whatever requirements that they've customized to whatever needs that they have. So in this case, they have quick links to certain vocabs, and also their vocabs are grouped under different teams. So they have a team that's managing geochemistry data. So they have a table now with vocabs for geochemistry. And there's another team called the QSI team, the Queensland Spatial Information Team. And they also have a section here for just vocabs that are related to QSI. And here we have another column that we haven't seen before, which is for themes. And basically, even within, different sub owners or sub organizations, you can then tag your vocabs with themes to further categorize them into different areas. The next Prez instance used by GSWA, so they're the Geological Survey of Western Australia. So they had a different approach. They didn't care about the spatial catalog or the other data catalog side of Prez. So they got rid of all of that, and what they've done is they've got everything focused on vocabs. So the landing page is just a summary of the vocab system. The navigation, they've stripped everything else out, and they've only got navigation that's related to vocabs. And just navigating through this, again, they've literally customized everything. They have very strict design guidelines, so everything here has been modified to adhere to those guidelines. This is the NERC vocab server by the British Oceanographic Data Center. Sorry. This is again another very highly customized version of VocPrez. I believe it was under version 2, or it may have been the start of version 3. But even though these guys, they manage their vocabs using the SCOS data model, they do govern it in a different way, and they structure the vocabs in a different way as well. So VocPrez was customized here to fit their needs. For their vocabs, they want to list it in a certain way. They want to show their IDs in a certain way. And as you click on these, sorry, it's loading. I'll click on another one. As you go into it, rather than seeing a concept hierarchy, what they wanted was a table of concepts. So that's what we're seeing here. Sorry, if I load this one, will that work? Okay, maybe they're having some issues on their servers. We'll go to the next vocab instance. All right, so this one is a pretty exciting one. I used to work at Turn and managed a lot of the data and did all of the vocabs and set up their servers and all that kind of stuff. But since then, they've also adopted Prez, and this was, they went ahead and did this on their own. So they have a highly technical team there that took Prez and they've embedded it into their existing TurnLink data web application. So from the front of it, it looks like a normal application, and you can navigate around to the other services and stuff. But as you go into their vocabs, immediately you can now see that they've actually embedded Prez inside of here. And this is a good example of the customizations that you can do. So they've modified a lot of things. They've changed the colors. They have very powerful servers. So as you navigate around these large vocabs, you can actually see it's quite speedy. So I'm gonna view this parameters vocab, which is, it also has like, I think 8,000 concepts, and it actually loads pretty fast. So as I expand this, you can see it loads really quickly. And another thing that they've changed is they've added the number of concepts that are under some top level concept. So this was not in the normal Prez, and they've added that. So I think after this conversation, after this presentation, I might go and give them a call and just ask them, how did you do this, and whether they can actually contribute back to Prez so that everyone else can benefit from this feature. But yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's a useful feature that they've added here. All right, last one, which is the OGC Rainbow. It's another VocPrez instance. I just wanted to quickly show you a custom widget that they've added, which I think is very useful. So they've added this graph view of the resource that you're viewing. And this is really cool because now you can see what are the inbound and outbound relationships to this thing. So imagine if you have an organization and you have different people within it, you can now see who are within that organization and navigate the knowledge graph using this thing. So if I click on this node here, I can actually go to that other resource and then see what other things are related to it. So that's another really cool thing that they've added. So again, I might give them a call after this and see if they can contribute this back into Prez. All right, I'm going to go back to the slides now. So we've talked about knowledge graphs. We've talked about Prez sitting on top of that. Now, how do other systems work with Prez? So Prez has a set of standard APIs. And usually in the projects that we've worked on, clients usually have other systems that have forms that they want to, have users edit. And these forms usually need to utilize the vocabs or the cataloged items in the knowledge graph. So for example, in this application, they're managing addresses and roads, and these roads have different road types. The drop-down values are actually populated from these vocabs. Same kind of deal with this other application, the Turn EcoPlot Starter Portal. I might just quickly show you what that looks like. So they have this application which allows you to navigate, search, interrogate all these observational data that they've collected across Australia. And through here, you have different facets that you can use to filter and search. And all of these things, remember that big parameters vocab, it's all being driven. Sorry, all of those vocabs are driving these facet drop-down things. So I can search and query different things. And it's all controlled. So users aren't, fumbling and typing the wrong thing. They're all getting the exact terms that are in the knowledge graph. All right, so that's all of the data in knowledge graphs. We have vocabs, we have resources. Now we want to like, you know, actually create these things and load them into the knowledge graph. I know with GA, you have a Git repository, which is awesome. This is pretty much the recommended way. Sorry, this is what we recommend to clients, how to pick up knowledge graphs and to get started with vocabs, is to create a GitHub repository. It's very low barrier to entry. Usually they're public, so you can build a community around it. You can collaborate with other organizations. It has a built-in issue tracker. It has the pull request workflow, so you can control what changes are being made to it. And it has that provenance information through the Git commits. In terms of creating and editing, right now, for that initial creation, you can use vocexcel. So vocexcel conforms to the vocpub standard. It's ensured, like we ensure that it's backwards compatible and it's available at tools.dev.kurrawong.ai. So basically you just download a vocexcel template, fill it in, upload it to the tool, and it will convert it to that vocab file that you can then save to your repository. But then subsequent edits to those vocabs will require you to edit those text files directly in GitHub. So in the future, we do have plans and ideas to develop another tool on tools.dev.kurrawong.ai where you can then use the application to open a vocab file, make changes in a nice UI, and then save it back to your computer's disk drive. And then from there, you just do your normal Git workflow. So as you move more of your data into your knowledge graph, you do want to start managing not just vocabs, but your other resources, right? So this is where the next phase is to really move your source of truth from your GitHub repositories to the actual knowledge graph. And to do that, you usually use some kind of 3-tier architecture. So you have your database, your web service, and a web browser. But by moving to this kind of thing, you automatically lose a lot of the benefits that you had when you use GitHub. So you lose, all of that provenance tracking using Git commits. You lose the pull request workflow and all of that stuff. So with our clients who are planning to move to a more integrated knowledge graph, we have started using an event-driven architecture. So by using this and using the event sourcing pattern, we still have our knowledge graph there. We still have our web service and our web application for them to make changes and edits to the knowledge graph. But now there's this message broker that's sitting in the middle. So basically, whenever a user makes a change, when they add something, when they delete something in the knowledge graph, whether that's the vocab or some kind of resource, these are sent as messages to the message broker. And each message describes exactly what action the user has performed, and why they performed that action, as well as who actually performed it. And from here, a message processor will process those messages and then apply those changes to the knowledge graph. By using this architecture, we're now able to maintain that provenance trail, so that audit trail of messages, where our clients can now go back whenever they need to look at why something was changed, by who and for what reason. And in any case, when the database goes into a bad state, they can also roll back to a valid state by just replaying those messages. Some of the projects that we're planning to use this architecture is with GSWA. So they're modernizing their cataloging system by moving everything to a knowledge graph. We're going to be using Prez to display those catalogs and to drive searches for users. And we're going to be developing an administration panel for them to edit the different catalog records. With Queensland Government, we're modernising their location addressing system. So same kind of thing. Rather than managing catalogues, they're now managing roads, geographical names, and addresses in this new architecture. You can see from this wireframe, it just looks like a normal web application, but behind the scenes, it's got all of the powers of the knowledge graph and vocabs and using the usage of IRIs and that kind of stuff. I mentioned we lose, the provenance stuff, but with this new architecture, by having those messages in the message broker, we do have these these things that we call change requests made available in this application. So when people make changes, we now have admins with different roles that can come along and inspect what things are being changed and either approve or reject them. And because we're maintaining that audit log, when you're viewing a resource, such as this thing called the Balloon Highway, on the right-hand side, you do have that historical timeline of changes that were made to this resource. All right, I think, yeah, so that's the end of my presentation. Let me know if you have any questions.